You're 20 minutes late. What's the excuse? Couldn't find the building? Or can't your kind read a clock?
Solomon Archer stood in the doorway.
I had a night shift, sir. I work at a gas station.
Whitfield nodded slowly.
That makes sense. That's about right for someone like you.
I just need to get to my seat, Professor.
Your seat?
Whitfield picked up the chalk.
You don't have a seat, not until you earn one.
He turned to the board.
Wrote a Millennium Prize variant. A problem that had ended doctoral careers.
Solve this. Right here. In front of everyone. If you can't, you walk out and don't come back.
Inside Solomon's backpack sat 200 pages of proofs Whitfield would never understand. He had no idea he'd just handed his career's death sentence to the one student he should have never challenged. Man, just wait. Because what happened next in that classroom? Nobody saw it coming. The fluorescent lights in Lecture Hall C buzzed, the way they always did at 8 in the morning. Flat, white, indifferent. 214 students sat in tiered rows, notebooks open, laptops glowing. Nobody talking. The air smelled like coffee and dry erase markers. Professor Gerald Whitfield stood behind the oak lectern like a man who owned the room and everything breathing inside it. Silver hair swept back, reading glasses low on his nose. 31 years in this department, 22 as chair. He didn't teach, he performed. Every sentence measured, every pause deliberate. The kind of man who mistook silence for respect and obedience for admiration. He was halfway through a proof on non-Euclidean surface mapping when the door opened. Not pushed, not swung, just opened. Slow. Careful. The way someone opens a door when they already know they're late and they already know what's waiting on the other side. Solomon Archer stepped in at 8:21 a.m. Gray hoodie, grease stain near the left cuff, work boots with dried mud along the soles. A backpack hung from one shoulder, olive green, fraying at the zipper, held together with a strip of duct tape. The faint smell of gasoline followed him into the room, like something he couldn't wash off, no matter how hard he tried. Every head turned. Whitfield stopped writing. The chalk hovered an inch from the board. He didn't turn around right away. He let the silence stretch. 3 seconds. 4. 5. Because men like Gerald Whitfield understood that silence was a weapon, and he wanted every student in that room to feel it before he used his voice. Then he turned. Slowly. Eyes moving from Solomon's boots to his hoodie to his face. He didn't see a student. He saw a target. You're 20 minutes late. Whitfield set the chalk down, folded his arms. On the first day of my class, in my lecture hall, with 200 people who managed to show up on time. He let that hang in the air. So, he tilted his head, the corner of his mouth lifted. Not a smile, something colder. What's your excuse? Solomon stood in the doorway, backpack strapped tight in his fist. He didn't know yet that the next 15 minutes would change both of their lives forever. I had a night shift, sir. Solomon's voice was steady, quiet. The kind of quiet that comes from years of practice, years of learning that loud got you nowhere. I work at a gas station off Route 9. My shift ended at 6. I took 2 buses to get here. Whitfield blinked, then smiled. Not warmth, not understanding. The kind of smile a man wears when he's just been handed ammunition. A gas station. He repeated it slowly, turning the words over like he was tasting them. So you pump gas all night, and then you walk into my advanced mathematics class and expect to keep up? Yes, sir. You keep up in this class. Whitfield took off his glasses, cleaned them with a cloth from his breast pocket, took his time. Tell me something. What made you think you belonged here? Was it the recruiter who needed to fill a diversity slot? Or did someone in the admissions office feel sorry for you? A girl in the fourth row looked down at her desk. A boy near the window shifted in his seat. Nobody spoke. Solomon's jaw tightened, but his voice didn't change. I scored in the top 2% on the placement exam. I passed every prerequisite with, you passed. Whitfield held up a hand. Fine. Let's say you passed. Let's say the system worked exactly the way it was supposed to. He paused, looked at Solomon the way a man looks at a stain on an expensive shirt. But passing a test and understanding mathematics are two very different things. One requires memory. The other requires a mind that, and I say this with no disrespect, some people simply weren't built for. The room was so quiet, you could hear the fluorescent lights clicking overhead. Solomon stood still. His knuckles had gone white around the backpack strap. But his face gave nothing away. 17 years on the south side of Chicago had taught him that showing pain was the same as showing blood in open water. Whitfield walked back to the lectern, opened his attendance book, ran his finger down the list until he found it. Archer. Solomon Archer. He read the name like it meant nothing. No prior institution, no faculty recommendation, transfer from a community college. He looked up. Gas station employee. He closed the book. Well, Mr. Archer, since you've already disrupted my class by 20 minutes, and since you seem to believe you deserve to be here despite every piece of evidence suggesting otherwise, let me give you a chance to prove it. He turned to the board, picked up the chalk. And what he wrote next, he wrote for one reason only. Not to teach, not to challenge, to humiliate, to break, to make Solomon Archer walk out of that room and never come back. He wrote a problem that had no business being on an undergraduate board. A Millennium Prize variant. A problem that had chewed up and spit out doctoral candidates across 3 continents. He set the chalk down, turned to Solomon, and pointed. Solve it. The problem stretched across the board in Whitfield's sharp, angular handwriting. 4 lines of dense notation, symbols layered on top of symbols, a topological conjecture fused with advanced number theory, the kind of hybrid that didn't show up in textbooks because textbooks didn't go this far. 3 doctoral candidates at Cambridge had spent 2 years on a version of this problem. They published a paper admitting defeat. A team at MIT had taken a different approach. They got closer, still failed. A Fields Medal winner in Zurich had called it beautifully unsolvable in a lecture that went viral in academic circles. And now it sat on a chalkboard in an undergraduate lecture hall, written by a man who had no intention of seeing it solved. Whitfield leaned against the lectern, arms folded, the faintest trace of a smile on his face, the kind a cat wears when it's already cornered the mouse and is just deciding how long to let it suffer. Go ahead. His voice carried across the silent room. You said you could handle this class. Here's your chance. Solomon looked at the board. He didn't move right away. His eyes tracked across the symbols the way a pianist's fingers hover above keys before the first note. Not hesitating. Reading. Absorbing. Seeing connections that weren't written on the surface but lived underneath them. 200 students watched, some with pity, some with second-hand embarrassment, a few with something sharper. The quiet cruelty of spectators who had already decided how this would end, and were just waiting for the body to hit the floor. 10 seconds passed. 20. A boy in the second row whispered to the girl beside him, "This is messed up." She didn't answer. Her eyes were on Solomon. At 30 seconds, Whitfield uncrossed his arms. "Having trouble already? I can write something simpler if you'd like. Maybe some long division. That might be more your level." Solomon didn't respond. He was still looking at the board. But something had shifted behind his eyes. Something quiet and dangerous. Something that looked, if you were paying close enough attention, like recognition. He set his backpack down on the floor, unzipped it, pulled out his notebook, the black one, no lines, pages dense with blue ink, and placed it on the front row desk without opening it. He didn't need to. Then he walked to the board. The chalk was sitting in the tray. He picked it up, rolled it once between his fingers, felt its weight. The room held its breath. Solomon lifted the chalk to the board, and he began to write. Not the way a student writes, tentative, checking each step, glancing back for approval. Solomon wrote the way water moves downhill, continuous, inevitable, each line flowing into the next with a certainty that had no business being in a 20-year-old's hand. He started at the top left, broke the problem into 3 layers that no one in the room, including Whitfield, had ever considered separating. The first layer peeled back the topological shell. The second isolated the number-theoretic core. The third was something entirely new. A bridge between 2 branches of mathematics that existing literature treated as completely unrelated. His handwriting was small, precise. Every symbol placed with surgical economy. Whitfield's smile faded at the 40-second mark. By the 2nd minute, he had uncrossed his arms. By the 4th minute, he had taken a step closer to the board. By the 7th minute, his mouth was slightly open. The chalk kept moving. Solomon hadn't looked back once. 12 minutes. That's how long it took Solomon Archer to dismantle a problem that had defeated some of the finest mathematical minds on the planet. 12 minutes of chalk on slate. 12 minutes of silence so thick you could drown in it. He filled the first board in 9 minutes. Moved to the second. His hand never paused, never stuttered, never went back to erase a line. Every equation landed where it was supposed to land, clean, inevitable, like they'd been waiting there all along. And Solomon was just the first person who knew where to look. At the 10-minute mark, something happened in the room. It started with a girl in the 6th row, a senior, double major in mathematics and physics. She had been following the proof line by line, checking each step against what she knew. At the 10-minute mark, she stopped checking. Not because she was lost, because she had run out of mathematics to check it against. Solomon had moved past everything she'd ever learned and into territory she didn't recognize. She leaned forward. Her pen fell off her desk. She didn't pick it up. A teaching assistant sitting near the window had his laptop open. He'd been quietly searching online, trying to find the problem, trying to find a published solution, anything to explain what he was watching. His search returned nothing. No solution existed. Not published, not pre-printed, not anywhere. He closed his laptop. At the 11-minute mark, Whitfield's face had gone the color of old paper. His hands were at his sides. His jaw was clenched so tight you could see the muscles jumping beneath the skin. He wasn't watching the proof anymore. He was watching his own career rewrite itself in real time because he knew. Somewhere between minutes 7 and 11, Gerald Whitfield, 31 years in the department, 22 as chair, author of 4 textbooks, keynote speaker at conferences across 2 continents, realized that the kid from the gas station was not guessing, was not copying, was not getting lucky. The kid was right. At 12 minutes and 14 seconds, Solomon set the chalk down. The final line of the proof sat on the board like a sentence that had been waiting 30 years to be spoken. Elegant, complete, irrefutable. Solomon turned around. He didn't smile, didn't gloat, didn't look at Whitfield for approval. He just turned and faced the room the way a man faces a storm. Steady, quiet, already knowing what comes next. The silence lasted 6 seconds. Then a voice from the back of the hall, a senior named Travis Wells, who had failed this class twice, said the only words that fit. Holy shit. Nobody laughed. Nobody moved. 200 students sat frozen in their seats, staring at a board full of mathematics that none of them fully understood. But all of them could feel, the way you feel thunder before you hear it. Whitfield hadn't moved. His eyes were locked on the board, reading, rereading, looking for the mistake that would save him, the error that would let him breathe again. There was no mistake. Solomon walked back to his seat, picked up his backpack, sat down in the second-to-last row, far left corner, opened his notebook to a blank page, and waited. The room stayed silent. Whitfield stayed at the board. The fluorescent lights kept buzzing overhead, indifferent to what had just happened beneath them. Nobody said a word for the rest of the class. When the bell rang 53 minutes later, Whitfield was the first one out the door. Nah, stop. Imagine standing there, whole room laughing at you, professor calling you trash to your face, and you just pick up the chalk and destroy him. No words, no anger, just math. I got chills, man. Absolute chills. By noon that day, the email was already sent. Whitfield sat in his office on the 3rd floor of the Harrington Mathematics Building. Door closed, blinds drawn, the hum of the air conditioning the only sound. His fingers had typed the words with the precision of a man building a case he already knew was weak, but couldn't afford to lose. Subject: academic integrity violation. Solomon Archer. Student ID number 30892. I am formally reporting suspected academic dishonesty in my advanced mathematics course. The student in question produced a solution to a graduate-level problem within minutes of seeing it for the first time. The speed and accuracy of the response are inconsistent with the student's academic background and suggest prior access to materials or external assistance. He didn't mention the gas station. Didn't mention the hoodie. Didn't mention what he'd said in front of 200 witnesses. He wrote the email the way powerful men always write emails, with just enough truth to sound reasonable and just enough omission to hide the ugliness underneath. The Dean of Academic Affairs responded within the hour. By 3 o'clock, Solomon Archer was sitting in a windowless conference room on the 2nd floor of the administration building. Gray walls, long table. 3 chairs on one side. Dean Catherine Hartwell, Associate Dean Philip Reeves, and a faculty representative Solomon had never met. 1 chair on the other side. Solomon sat alone. No lawyer. No advisor, no one to explain that he had rights, no one to tell him that the way they were looking at him, like a problem to be processed, was not how this was supposed to work. Mr. Archer, Dean Hartwell opened a folder. Professor Whitfield has filed a formal complaint alleging that you presented work that was not your own during this morning's lecture. Can you tell us what happened? Solomon told them. The night shift, the bus, the late arrival, the problem on the board, how he solved it. And you're saying you solved a millennium-level variant without notes, without preparation, in 12 minutes? Yes, ma'am. Reeves leaned back in his chair, crossed his arms. Do you understand how that sounds? I understand how it sounds, but that's what happened. They asked him where he learned advanced topology. He told them. Library books, public computers, free online lectures. They asked him who his mentor was. He said he didn't have one. They asked him if he'd ever seen the specific problem before. He said no. Every answer he gave made them believe him less, because the truth didn't fit the narrative. A kid from the South Side, night shift gas station employee, community college transfer, no connections, no pedigree, no letters of recommendation from anyone whose name they recognized. People like Solomon Archer were not supposed to solve problems like that. And when they did, the system's first instinct was not to celebrate. It was to investigate. Whitfield wasn't in the room. He didn't need to be. The accusation was the weapon. The process was the punishment. By the end of the week, the word had spread across campus like smoke through a ventilation shaft. Half the students in Lecture Hall C believed Solomon had cheated. The other half weren't sure. A handful, the ones who had watched his chalk move across that board with their own eyes, knew the truth, but didn't say it out loud. Because saying it out loud meant picking a side, and picking a side against a department chair with 31 years of tenure was not something undergraduate students did. Solomon ate lunch alone, studied alone, walked across campus alone, headphones in, hood up, eyes forward. The notebook never left his backpack. He still filled it every night, still worked through proofs at the library until closing time, still caught the last bus home and clocked in at the gas station by 11. The math didn't stop. Solomon didn't stop. But nobody was watching anymore, or so he thought. Solomon Archer was 10 years old the first time he fell in love with a number. He was riding the 63rd Street bus home from school, the one with the torn seats and the driver who never checked fares, when he found a book wedged between the seat cushion and the window frame. Dark blue cover, dog-eared corners, coffee stain on the back. Introduction to Higher Mathematics, 3rd edition. He opened it the way most 10-year-olds open things they don't understand. Curious, reckless, with no idea that what they're holding will change the shape of their life. The first chapter was about sets, the second about functions. By the third chapter, he was lost. He took the book home anyway. His mother, Denise Archer, was standing at the kitchen counter when he walked in. She worked 2 jobs. Morning shift cleaning offices at a downtown law firm, evening shift folding laundry at a hotel on Michigan Avenue. She was 34 years old and looked 45. Her hands were always dry. Her back always hurt. She never complained. "What's that?" she asked, looking at the book. "Math. Homework?" "No, I just found it." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "Don't stay up too late." He stayed up until 1 in the morning. The next day, he went to the Harold Washington Library on State Street, walked past the security guard who barely glanced at him, found the mathematics section on the 4th floor, pulled out every book that had numbers on the spine. That was the beginning. Over the next 6 years, Solomon taught himself calculus from a textbook with a broken spine and someone else's notes in the margins. He taught himself linear algebra from a book that was missing chapters 11 through 13. He derived what was missing on his own, and only realized years later that his derivations were cleaner than the originals. He taught himself abstract algebra, real analysis, topology, differential equations, number theory, all from library books, all for free. all alone. The librarian noticed. Her name was Mrs. Evelyn Patterson, 62 years old, wire-rimmed glasses, a cardigan in every color. She had worked at the Harold Washington Library for 28 years and had seen every kind of person come through those doors. Students, homeless men, single mothers, teenagers hiding from the cold. She knew the regulars. She knew the ones who came to sleep, and the ones who came to read. Solomon was different. He came every day after school. Same table, third floor, back corner, near the window. He didn't read novels. He didn't browse. He sat down, opened the mathematics textbook, and didn't move for hours. His pen moved the entire time. Pages and pages of equations in a black notebook with no lines. One afternoon, when Solomon was 13, Mrs. Patterson walked over and set a stack of papers on his table, printed from the university database. Research papers on algebraic topology, the subject Solomon had been struggling with for weeks. "I'm not supposed to print these," she said quietly, "but I thought you might need them." Solomon looked up at her. He didn't say thank you right away. His eyes were wet. She printed papers for him every week after that, quietly, without being asked. She never understood the mathematics. She didn't need to. She understood the boy. By 16, Solomon had exhausted everything the library had. He started reading research papers on archive.org using the library's public computers, free preprints from mathematicians around the world. He read papers from Princeton, Cambridge, ETH Zurich. He read them the way musicians listen to recordings of the masters, studying structure, absorbing technique, building a vocabulary that no one in his neighborhood knew existed. His mother didn't understand the math. She never pretended to. But every night, when Solomon sat at the kitchen table with his notebook, she saw something in his face that she recognized. The same look her own father had when he played piano on Sunday mornings. A man inside his purpose. "You're going to do something with all this," she told him once. Not a question. Solomon smiled. "I'm trying, Mama." He graduated high school with a 4.0 and a partial scholarship to a university 2 bus rides away. The scholarship covered tuition. It didn't cover books, didn't cover food, didn't cover the gap between what financial aid promised and what it actually delivered. So Solomon got a job at a gas station off Route 9. Night shift, 11 to 6. Every night. That's why he was 20 minutes late on the first day of advanced mathematics. Dr. Elaine Cross arrived on campus on a Thursday afternoon in October, 3 weeks after Solomon Archer solved a problem that nobody believed he solved. She came as a visiting lecturer, 1 seminar, 2 days, then back to her office at Stanford, where she held an endowed chair in pure mathematics, and a Fields Medal that sat on her bookshelf, next to a framed photo of her daughter. She was 56 years old, short gray hair, no makeup. She wore the same navy blazer to every lecture and carried a leather bag that had been to 37 countries. She was the kind of woman who had stopped caring about impressions 20 years ago, because when you've solved problems that reshape entire fields, you don't need a first impression. Your work walks into the room before you do. She heard about Solomon during lunch with the faculty. It wasn't presented as a discovery. It was presented as a scandal. Whitfield's version. The official version. A student with no background. A suspicious solution. An ongoing investigation. Cross listened, ate her salad, said nothing. Then she asked one question. "Can I see the proof?" Whitfield hesitated. "It's part of the disciplinary file. I didn't ask about the file. I asked about the proof." The associate dean provided a photocopy that afternoon. Cross sat in the guest office on the 4th floor of the Harrington Building. Closed the door. Spread the pages across the desk. 6 sheets. Solomon's handwriting. Small, precise, blue ink. She started reading at 2:15 p.m. At 2:18, she set down her coffee. At 2:22, she pulled a blank notepad from her bag and started verifying each step. At 2:31, she stopped verifying. Not because the proof was wrong, because she recognized what she was looking at. The approach Solomon had used, bridging topological methods with number-theoretic structures through an intermediate framework, didn't exist in any published literature. She knew this because she had spent 11 years looking for exactly this kind of bridge. She had published 2 papers exploring its possibility. She had called it the gap in a keynote speech at the International Congress of Mathematicians in Seoul, and a 20-year-old kid from a gas station on Route 9 had closed it in 12 minutes on a chalkboard while being insulted. Cross sat back in her chair, took off her glasses, pressed her fingers to her temples. She said one word out loud to an empty room. Remarkable. Then she stood up and went to find Solomon Archer. She found him where she expected to find someone like him. In the library. Back corner, 3rd floor, alone. Headphones in. Notebook open. The same black notebook she had seen described in the disciplinary file. She sat down across from him, didn't introduce herself, just placed the photocopy of his proof on the table between them and said, "Tell me about this bridge in the 3rd section. Where did it come from?" Solomon looked at the pages, then looked at her. He didn't know who she was, didn't recognize the face that had appeared on the cover of Nature twice. "I started noticing the pattern when I was 15, he said, in the library. I was reading a paper on Poincaré's conjecture and another on prime distribution. They were shelved next to each other. I kept flipping between them, and I started seeing connections." "Yeah." Cross nodded slowly. "May I?" She gestured toward the notebook. Solomon hesitated. Nobody had ever asked to see the notebook. He slid it across the table. She opened it to the 1st page, then the 2nd, the 3rd. Her eyes moved faster with every page. By page 20, her hands were trembling, not from age, from excitement. 200 pages of original mathematics, proofs, conjectures, frameworks, ideas that had no precedent in any journal she had ever read. She closed the notebook, set it down gently, the way you set down something you know is worth more than anything else in the room. "How long have you been working on these?" "Since I was 10. "Does anyone else know about this?" "No." Cross looked at him for a long time. Then she said something that Solomon Archer had waited his entire life to hear. "You're not in trouble. You're in the wrong room. You should be teaching this class, not sitting in it." The disciplinary hearing was scheduled for Monday at 10. Dr. Elaine Cross walked into the conference room at 9:58 with a leather bag over one shoulder and a stack of documents under her arm. She hadn't been invited. She didn't need to be. Dean Hartwell looked up from her folder. "Dr. Cross, this is an internal—" "I'm aware of what it is." Cross pulled out a chair, sat down, set her bag on the floor with the calm of a woman who had faced rooms like this before and won every time. "I'm also aware that you're about to expel the most talented undergraduate mathematician I've encountered in 30 years of research. So I thought I'd save everyone the embarrassment." Whitfield was sitting at the end of the table. His face tightened. "With all due respect, Dr. Cross, you arrived on campus last week. You don't have the context. I have the proof." Cross opened her folder, laid the 6 photocopied pages on the table, side by side. "I've spent 4 days verifying every line. The mathematics is not only correct,
It introduces a novel bridging framework between topological analysis and number theory that doesn't exist in any published literature. I know this because I've spent 11 years looking for it. The room went quiet.
Cross continued. I've also consulted with 2 colleagues, Dr. James Holloway at Princeton and Dr. Sven Lindquist at ETH Zurich. Both have reviewed the proof independently. Both confirmed its validity. Dr. Holloway's exact words were, she pulled a printed email from the folder, "This is either the work of a generational talent or a well-funded research team. Given that it was done in 12 minutes by a single undergraduate, I am going with generational talent." She set the email on the table. So, Cross folded her hands, unless this committee has mathematical evidence to the contrary, not suspicion, not discomfort, not the personal feelings of a professor who was publicly embarrassed in his own classroom, I suggest we close this investigation today. Whitfield's jaw worked. His eyes moved to Dean Hartwell, to Reeves, back to Cross. The speed of the solution was extraordinary. That's correct. Cross didn't blink. That's what talent looks like. Some of us recognize it. Some of us are threatened by it. Dean Hartwell closed her folder, looked at Whitfield for a long 3 seconds, then looked at Cross. The investigation is closed. Mr. Archer is cleared of all charges. Whitfield stood up, his chair scraped against the floor. He walked out without a word. Cross found Solomon in the hallway afterward. He was sitting on a bench near the stairwell, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. "It's over," she said. "You're cleared." He didn't look up right away. When he did, his eyes were red. Not from crying, from the effort of not crying. "Thank you. Don't thank me. Thank your proof. I just made sure the right people read it." She sat down beside him. "Now, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think about it seriously before you answer." Solomon waited. The National Mathematics Symposium is in Boston in 6 weeks. 300 of the top mathematicians in the world. I've been allocated a presentation slot, and I want to give it to you. Solomon's head turned. "Me? Your proof, your method, your bridge, presented by you, in front of the people who need to see it." "I've never been to Boston." "I know. I've never presented anything. I've never stood in front of... I work at a gas station." Cross looked at him. "You worked at a gas station. There's a difference." She paused. "The world needs to see what you can do, Solomon. Not for me, not for this university. For every kid sitting in a library right now with a notebook full of ideas and nobody paying attention." Solomon stared at the floor again. His hands were folded tight. The hallway was empty, except for the 2 of them, and the sound of footsteps fading somewhere above. "Okay," he said quietly. "I'll do it." Cross nodded, stood up, smoothed her blazer. "Good. We have 6 weeks. I'll help you prepare." She was halfway down the hall when Solomon called after her. "Dr. Cross?" She turned. Nobody's ever done that for me before. Walked into a room like that. Cross smiled. The first real smile Solomon had seen from her. "Get used to it." The National Mathematics Symposium was held that year at the Boston Convention Center, a building made of glass and steel that sat on the waterfront like a monument to everything Solomon Archer had never been allowed to touch. 600 mathematicians, tenured professors from 42 countries, research fellows, department chairs, journal editors, Fields Medal recipients. The kind of people who spent their lives inside equations, the way other people spend their lives inside offices, completely, obsessively, without apology. Solomon arrived on a Tuesday evening in November. Cross had bought his plane ticket. First time flying. He sat in the window seat and stared at the clouds for 3 hours without closing his eyes. The hotel room was the nicest room he had ever been in. White sheets, a bathroom bigger than his bedroom, a view of the harbor. He set his backpack on the bed, the same olive green backpack with the duct tape, and sat on the edge of the mattress for a long time, looking at the closet where Cross had hung the suit she'd helped him buy. The presentation was scheduled for Wednesday at 2:15 p.m., main auditorium, slot 14 of 22. At 2:10, Solomon stood backstage. He could hear the applause fading from the previous speaker, a professor from Oxford who had presented new findings on prime gap distribution. Polished, confident, decades of experience at podiums just like this one. Solomon looked down at his hands. They were shaking. Cross was standing next to him. She didn't say, "You'll be fine," or "Don't be nervous," or any of the things people say when they don't know what else to say. She looked at his hands, then looked at him. "Remember the board in Whitfield's classroom?" "Yeah." "Same thing. Bigger board." Solomon almost smiled. Almost. The moderator called his name. "Our next presenter, Solomon Archer, undergraduate, presenting A Novel Bridge Between Topological Methods and Number-Theoretic Structures." He walked out. The auditorium was full. 500 seats, maybe more, standing along the walls. The stage lights were bright enough that he couldn't see individual faces, just shapes, silhouettes, the occasional glint of glasses. He reached the podium, set his notes down, looked at them, then looked at the audience. His first sentence came out wrong, too fast, too quiet. He cleared his throat, started again. "My name is Solomon Archer. I'm an undergraduate. I used to work, at a gas station in Illinois. And about 2 months ago, my professor put a problem on the board that he didn't think I could solve." A murmur moved through the room. Not mockery, curiosity. He was wrong. Solomon clicked to his first slide. And then something happened that Dr. Cross would later describe as watching a river find the sea. The nervousness didn't disappear, it dissolved. It melted into the mathematics the way ice melts into water, becoming part of the flow rather than blocking it. He spoke for 28 minutes. He walked them through the bridge, the connection between topological methods and number theory that he had first glimpsed at 15, flipping between 2 books shelved next to each other in a public library. He explained each layer, showed each step, built the framework from the ground up with a clarity that made professors who had spent decades in the field lean forward in their seats and write notes. At minute 19, he departed from his slides. A question had come to him on the flight, a natural extension of the bridge that he hadn't had time to formalize. He picked up the marker, turned to the whiteboard behind him, and started writing. The room went silent. It was Lecture Hall C all over again. Except this time, the people watching weren't undergraduates. They were the best in the world. And they weren't watching with confusion. They were watching with recognition. At minute 26, a woman in the third row, Dr. Margaret Boyle, chair of the mathematics department at MIT, took off her glasses and set them on her lap. She had stopped taking notes 4 minutes ago. She was just watching. Solomon finished, set the marker down, turned back to the microphone. "That's what I have. Thank you." Silence. 1 second. 2 seconds. 3. Then Dr. Boyle stood up, started clapping. Alone at first, then the row behind her, then the row behind that, then the entire left section, then the right. 500 people on their feet. A standing ovation for a 20-year-old kid who had learned mathematics from library books and proved something that world-class researchers had failed to prove for decades. The applause lasted 45 seconds. Solomon stood at the podium. His hands weren't shaking anymore. In a hotel room 300 miles away, Gerald Whitfield sat in front of his laptop. The symposium was being live-streamed. He had watched every minute. His screen showed the standing ovation, the camera on Solomon's face. Whitfield closed the laptop. Slowly. The room went dark. He sat there for a long time. The video of Solomon's presentation was uploaded to the symposium's official channel on Thursday morning. By Friday afternoon, it had been shared across every major mathematics forum on the Internet. By Sunday, it had crossed over from academic circles into the wider world. Twitter, Reddit, YouTube. The comment sections exploded. This kid solved a millennium-level problem in 12 minutes on a chalkboard while his professor was trying to humiliate him. I'm sorry, what? Solomon Archer learned topology from library books. Library books. While working night shifts. While being accused of cheating. And you're telling me the system almost threw him away? The professor's name is Gerald Whitfield. Look up his Rate My Professor page. This isn't the first time. That last comment was the one that changed everything. Because when people started looking, they found exactly what they expected to find, and what the university had spent years pretending wasn't there. A former student named Angela Torres posted a thread on Twitter. She had taken Whitfield's class 6 years earlier. She was Latina. She lasted 3 weeks before dropping out. Not because she couldn't do the math, but because Whitfield had told her, in front of 40 students, that she should consider a major that doesn't require logical thinking. A man named Derek Hayes posted next. Black, engineering student. He had attempted Whitfield's class 4 years ago. Whitfield failed him on the midterm, a test Derek had studied for months. When Derek asked to review the grading, Whitfield refused. Derek transferred schools the following semester. He never went back to mathematics. Then a third, then a fourth, then an eighth. 8 former students, all minorities, all with the same story. Different years, different classes, same pattern. The casual cruelty, the public humiliation, the grades that didn't match the work, the complaints that went nowhere, because the man filing the complaints was also the man chairing the department. The university launched an internal investigation on Monday. By Wednesday, Whitfield had been removed as department chair. His classes were reassigned. His office door, which had been open for 31 years, was now closed. A small printed notice taped to the front. Faculty member on administrative leave pending review. Nobody taped a notice on Solomon Archer's door. What happened to him was quieter and infinitely bigger. Dr. Margaret Boyle, the MIT professor who had stood up first during the standing ovation in Boston, sent Solomon an email 3 days after the symposium. 4 sentences. Mr. Archer, I have not been this impressed by a mathematical presentation in 23 years. I would like to offer you a full doctoral fellowship at MIT beginning next fall. Full tuition, full stipend. No gas stations required. Please call me at your earliest convenience. Solomon read the email on his phone, sitting on a bench outside the library. He read it 3 times. Then he called his mother. Denise Archer picked up on the second ring. She was on her break at the law firm, eating a sandwich in the back hallway near the service elevator, the one the cleaning staff used because they weren't allowed to use the main elevator with the lawyers and the clients. Mama? What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. I got in. MIT. Full ride. They're paying for everything. The line went quiet. Mama? She was crying.
Not the way people cry in movies. Loud, dramatic, hands over the mouth. Denise Archer cried the way she did everything else. Quietly, with her eyes closed, standing in a hallway that nobody important ever walked through, holding a half-eaten sandwich in one hand and her son's future in the other. "I knew it," she whispered. "I always knew it."
Solomon pressed the phone against his ear. His eyes were closed, too. Two people, 300 miles apart, standing in silence, holding the same moment between them like something fragile and unbreakable at the same time. When Solomon hung up, he sat on the bench for another 10 minutes. Then he stood up, walked into the library, took the stairs to the 4th floor, turned left at the reference section. Mrs. Patterson was sitting at her desk, sorting return slips. Solomon placed a printed copy of his symposium paper on the counter. On the first page, below the title and the abstract, he had written in blue ink, "For Evelyn Patterson." It started with a book on a bus. Thank you for every page after that. Mrs. Patterson picked up the paper, read the inscription, took off her glasses, set them on the desk. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then she reached across the counter and held Solomon's hand, the same hand that had picked up a chalk and changed everything. And she squeezed it once. "Go," she said. "Go show them." Solomon Archer started at MIT the following fall. He moved into a small apartment in Cambridge, the first time he'd ever lived alone, the first time he'd ever had a bedroom with a door that locked. He kept the olive green backpack. He kept the black notebook. He kept the gas station name tag in his desk drawer, not out of nostalgia, but as a reminder of where he'd been and how close the world had come to never knowing his name. In his first year, he published 2 papers, both in top-tier journals, both co-authored with Dr. Boyle, who quickly became not just his advisor, but the second person in his life, after Mrs. Patterson, who saw him before anyone told her what to see. By his second year, he had been invited to speak at conferences in London, Tokyo, and Berlin. The boy who had never been on an airplane before Boston was now crossing oceans. The boy who had learned mathematics from water-damaged library books was now writing the books that other people would learn from. His third paper, on the topological arithmetic bridge, extensions, and applications, was published in the Annals of Mathematics. It was cited 112 times in the first year. Dr. Cross called it the most important contribution to the field in a decade. Coming from a woman who chose her words the way surgeons choose instruments, that meant everything. Gerald Whitfield resigned from the university at the end of that academic year. No press conference. No public statement. He packed his office on a Saturday morning when the building was empty. 31 years of tenure reduced to 12 cardboard boxes and a parking lot no one was watching. He never taught again. Every summer, Solomon goes home to Chicago. He runs a free mathematics workshop at the Harold Washington Library, the same library where he taught himself calculus from a book with a broken spine. The workshop meets on the 4th floor, back corner, near the window, his old table. The kids who show up are 10, 11, 12 years old. Most of them have never heard of topology. Some of them have never heard of anyone who looks like them doing what Solomon does. He doesn't lecture. He sits with them, shows them puzzles, waits for the moment their eyes change, the moment when a number stops being homework and starts being a doorway. Mrs. Patterson still works at the library. She's 65 now. Same wire-rimmed glasses, same cardigan rotation. But there's a new shelf near the mathematics section, a small one at eye level, with a hand-lettered sign that reads Solomon's Picks. 8 books. The same 8 books that changed his life. available to anyone who walks in off the street. Last September, Solomon stood in front of a lecture hall at MIT, his own class, his own students. 63 seats, all full. He was writing a proof on the board when the door opened. A young woman walked in, late, backpack over one shoulder, out of breath. "Sorry," she said. My shift ran late. I'm sorry." The room tensed. 62 students looked at Solomon, waiting. Solomon set the chalk down, looked at her, and smiled. "Glad you made it. Take a seat. We're just getting started." If this story moved you, leave a comment. Have you ever been underestimated because of how you looked? What did you do about it? Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you haven't already, subscribe, because stories like Solomon's deserve to be told, and heard, and remembered. Man, imagine if nobody showed up for him. Imagine if Dr. Cross never read that proof. How many Solomons are out there right now, solving problems in notebooks nobody will ever open? That's what keeps me up at night.